When did you move from Colnbrook then, Robin? 82 or what? I don't actually know.
Do you know, I can't remember precisely, but it would have been...
Matthew will know.
Yeah, he'll know. But I think it was kind of like the winter of 80, 81, 82.
Yeah. So into 82, that was another new car, wasn't it?
Not really. Not really. No, it wasn't. It was pretty much the same. What had changed was, of course, there was the drivers. It was then Niki and John. I, for all of my adventures in the previous season, I'd requested to move to the T car from the race car.
Now, why was that, Robin?
I just wanted a rest.
Yeah,
fair enough. The previous season. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you what a nightmare it was. I mean, it was nearly every time Andrea went out,
he crashed
every time he crashed it. You know, and that kind of gets to your head after a while. Yeah, that does kind of like get to your head after a while. But and then of course there was the work. It was just a constant work thing because you were not only you were fitting up extra stuff because you knew that it's going to there'd be front corners off and this, that, and the other. So we were pre-fitting suspension so that it could be marked up and put off, so that you knew that you were putting it straight back on, and you didn't have to do other than the toe-ins and whatever. The front end or basically the rear end and whatever would basically be set up, pre-fitted bodywork and bits and pieces, so that it was all. You could do it all quickly. I mean, it was just quantum work all the way through the season, irrespective of whether it was at the race meetings or back at the factory. Andrea never got to test it because you could guarantee if you went off testing. I mean, it did a couple of tests, but nothing major. Not I mean, Watson was out. Watson was out very, very regularly, and. Testing then the following season with Niki, because Niki was absolutely adamant that you had to pre-run at as many circuits before you had races there as possible. And bear in mind then also that there wasn't a test team. Nobody had test teams, separate test teams. So generally, the T car would be the one that would go, or T car, or one of the other cars would go off and do the testing. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 day tests. You might get Niki in the car for 2 days, and then Watty come along and run it for a day. I mean, the one that stands out in my mind with Niki was when we took the T car down to. Oh no, that was a little bit later on in the season. We went down to Imola and ran the carbon brakes for the first time. Well, we ran the carbon brakes, and Niki went out and did 1 lap and came back in, and all the grease had melted out of the hubs because it was so hot, and nobody got their heads around actually how much heat was generated, and you needed to separate it, needed to be heat heat extraction, but plus the extra cooling to the hubs and different greases in the hubs and various bits and pieces like that. But no, he went out and came back in. He said something's wrong, he said, because it just feels all wrong. In fact, it was. I mean, it was just all the hubs had got no grease in them at all. They'd all been burned out. But now I started on the T car in that season, and we went to Kyalami. That was the first race of the year, as I recall that season. Yes, I think it was the first race of the year we went to, and yes, it was definitely, and it was the one that they had the driver's strike. So we had I think it finished up that they had a run and qualifying in the last hours of Saturday afternoon when all the drivers had come back. And we'd been sat, all the teams and stuff had been sat around in the pits doing nothing for, 2.5 days. And of course, Niki was the bloody centre of it, wasn't he? He was the one that was stirring up all the shit, which was quite interesting, with Mr. Ecclestone tearing around trying to catch her, trying to, shake Teddy and Ron Dennis's tail about, their driver causing a bloody problem. Anyway, they finished up with an hour-long session, I think, where there was an hour of running, and then there was qualifying. So there was an hour and an hour, and in the hours running, Niki jumped into the T car because he wanted to have a run in it just to make sure. And there was some issues with his race car. What I don't know, but anyway, the bottom line is he jumped into the T car, went around something like second and a half lap faster in the T car. And that was a problem, because there's a new chief mechanic there at the time, and there was all sorts of fingers being pointed not only at the T car guy with the faster car, but also the race car guys that Niki was racing, because there must have been something dramatically wrong with the setup or whatever. And there wasn't enough time between the two sessions to ascertain what the differences were. But Niki, needless to say, wanted to qualify, and so jumped in the T car to go and do his qualifying in the T car, qualified in the T car. And because it was so much quicker than his race car and much quicker than Mr. Watson in his car, Mr. Watson then wanted to have a go in the T car as well to do that. And guess what? Mr. Watson crashed the T car. So we wound up with having sort of not being crashing cars for years or for a year, and wanted to get out of it. And there we were back in the deep end again with the not the back end of the tub smashed off, but it was there was a lot of damage that needed to be repaired. It was repairable, not a tub change or anything. I don't think we even had a tub. I think we had to repair what we got. Anyway, we repaired it. It was an all-nighter. And then we wound up with a conversation with the new chief mechanic the following day about how to set up a race car, which is all very well. Maybe I took it wrong. I don't know, but put it this way, I resigned on the spot. Walked down to Brabham's to Herbie Blash, who I knew socially. I didn't know him because I lived in Weybridge, and the pub that we used to go to regularly, McLaren's and Brabham's and Tyrrell's and whatever, is a famous pub in Shepperton called the King's Head.
That's right.
And I knew Herbie from there. You would do. And I walked down to Herbie's, and Herbie said, I said, I've quit up the road there. I said, you've got a job. And he said, strangely enough, we have actually, because this guy's leaving and that guy, no. Yes, when can you start? I said, well, I've not got a job at the moment, so I could probably start as soon as I get toolbox back from McLaren's, which is what I did. When we got back to the UK. I went into the factory, picked up my toolbox and left and went up to Brabham's.
Didn't they try and keep you, Robin?
They couldn't. They couldn't. They couldn't. There was, as far as I was concerned, there was no way that I was going to work in the situation where the work that I'd been doing, and that I'd been doing very, very well for a number of years, was challenged in any way, shape, or form. and whether it's pride or whatever, I don't know. But what's it? Pride comes before a fall, I think is the old expression. But in that case, I wasn't about to stand it, and I was particularly upset actually because the guy who became the chief mechanic had been a very good friend of mine, that I'd helped him build his Formula Ford and various bits and pieces, back in the day, and we've been quite good buddies. It's so it wasn't as if I was being, he didn't know me, because whatever. Anyway, it was just an unacceptable situation, and I'd got myself a new job, so went off down and started at Brabham's. I think I came in there on a Wednesday and arrived in the bay and saw my new car. I was working with a guy called Neil Harvey. K1 as he's known to his buddies, little New Zealand guy, and we hit it off straight away. We got on famously. In fact, we're still great buddies now. I speak to him on WhatsApp quite regularly. He lives in the States, in California. No, was in California. Now lives in Florida, and I think it was the Thursday afternoon. Herbie walked into the bay, and I was literally just familiarising myself with a completely new car, BT49, Cosworth BT49.
Yeah.
A fabulous machine. I'll talk, babble on about that for hours later on. I think it's one of the best cars that I've ever worked on, anyway. In terms of simplicity and just ease of maintenance, etc., etc., etc. Absolutely amazing bit of kit. Herbie walked into the bay and he said, sorry guys, you've drawn the short straw. You're off to the 2-day tyre test in Rio on Monday. And I thought, that's really weird. I've never worked on a car before, and done this car before, and they're sending me off testing. So Neil, Charlie Whiting and Herbie, myself, we jumped on an aeroplane, and with the car underneath us, I think Williams tested at the same time, and Williams, Ferrari, and I think it was still running the Goodyear tyres, and rocked up in Rio, bolted some tyres on, started it all up, off it went. We'd been running for about 20 minutes. And Goodyear's came along and said, "Stop! There's a problem with the tyres. They're delaminating, and it's a problem that's across the whole batch. So we're not going to be testing anymore. We'll see. We'll ship some more out from the States. But we're stopping the test." Herbie went off and phoned up Bernie, and Bernie said, "I'm not flying them. You're not flying them back to the UK and flying them back out there in 2 weeks' time. Tell Ligo to pay for the hotels and pay the guys' expenses, and you stay there until they've got the tyres ready." So we had 2 weeks in Rio on holiday, and that time of the year is the what was it when they do all the dancing and whatever, the carnival time. Brazilian driver Nelson Piquet. I mean, we were made in heaven. We got taken off down to the stadium and watched them, because the last events in this big stadium, and the big football stadium in Rio. We went off down there with that, and we just had an absolute ball. We went down with Nelson down to his place and went kite surfing. No, not kite surfing, windsurfing. I learned to windsurf down there, and that was kind of like a new sport back in the day with the windsurfers and stuff. And I like sailing anyway, but anyway, in due course, the tyres rocked up. They failed too. So we stayed out there for another 3 weeks, for another week. Another 2 weeks, I beg your pardon. In total, we were in Rio for 5 weeks. And the last weeks, when the race team came out, we'd prepped the T car and stuff all ready to go. Plus had a few more days away with Nelson down at a place called Guarujá, which is down on the coast there, just further away from just different to Rio anyway. And so that was a good crack, and it was the era, or was the time in F1 where there was water-cooled brakes, and we'd fitted up the car with this great big huge tank in the left-hand side pod to carry about 15 gallons of water. I mean, it's huge, monstrous, bloody great big void that behind the radiator duct. There was this great big void ahead of the exhaust, and so we just filled it up with this water tank, which is all then connected up to pipes and pumps and switches and whatever. So that when you touch the brake, the water sprayed onto the discs, carbon fiber discs, by the way. And we qualified. I'm not sure if we qualified on pole, but we certainly qualified very, very bloody quickly. And I'll never forget them saying, "Well, you're a bit underweight." But, we know we're underweight, but it's used water and it's used oil, and so we topped it all up. Of course, it was perfectly, within the weight from qualifying. Anyway, after the race, of course, Nelson won the race, and that was disqualified. Rosberg had got something similar. He was also disqualified. And then the next race after that was Long Beach, and we went very, very well in Long Beach. Had a great time in Long Beach, and then back to the UK. So I think I'd been away from home for about 7 weeks by the time I got back to the UK.
Who was your other driver, Robin? Who was your other driver?
Oh, we're in Tracy.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course,
Ricardo.
Yeah,
yeah, Ricardo in the other one, and something happened on race day, which was to me anyway, that was quite interesting, because I had a certain Mr. Ron Dennis, leave his cars on the grid and come back into the pits where I was working, and he said something to me which is quite interesting. He said, "I'll give you an offer you can't refuse. I really want you to come back and work for us at McLaren's. We've got a new job. It's running the test team, and I can't tell you all the ins and outs of it, but I'd like to see you, and as I say, make an offer that you can't refuse." So when I got back to the UK,
how long have you been at Brabham's at that point?
6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Oh, bloody hell. Okay. Oh, right.
Anyway, I went to see Ron and stuff, and yes, he did give me an offer that I couldn't refuse. So, equal status to the chief mechanic, equal salary to the chief mechanic, and the incentive was he bought me a brand new XR2, Ford XR2, as a gift.
Nice.
And yeah, okay, I'll do that. So started back at McLaren's again, which was certainly interesting. I didn't for a moment realise what it would all be about. And we did various tests with mostly with Niki, to be honest with you.
How was Bernie with you leaving Brabham's so quickly?
Well, it wasn't Bernie that was it wasn't Bernie that was sort of was miffed with me, really. It was Charlie and Herbie. Herbie was embarrassed because, of course, he'd employed me, and Charlie because and Gordon because all of a sudden I knew an awful lot about BT49, and I was going to McLaren. But in all fairness, in all honesty as well, absolute honesty, there was nothing. I was never questioned about the differences between the cars and what's the hot bits and what's the not hot bits and bits and pieces, because McLaren's was they were quite a competitive Cosworth engine car anyway. They were and they'd gone down, and anyway John Barnard's John Barnard. He's not going to copy somebody else. I mean, he was very, very much a kind of like in the same way as Gordon really is, that they follow their own paths and creativity, and just thought along completely different lines. What with one thing and another. So anyway, the testing operation was not a racing thing. It was just about developing news, getting stuff onto the car reliably, set up accurately, because there was never any questions about how accurate the setup was going to be again, and all that sort of fun and games. And yeah, so that was that really, and it cracked on with the testing, and then started off then with all the Porsche build and various bits and pieces. And I fell out again with the chief mechanic. We could not be in the same space for one reason or another. And I sort of quite quickly realised that if it wasn't going to be him or me, it was going to be me that would be thing. So I went back to Brabham's.
After how long in this time? How long were you at McLaren?
It was probably about 6 months, 7 months, or whatever. They were built at that time. They were midway through building. The season was pretty much over, and there was the BT49 BMW was then being upgraded then to the full-on BT50, which was a fantastic car. I mean, I wish the rules hadn't changed and the BT50 had gone out. But having said that, I think it probably would have overpowered not only the rest of the other teams, but it would have overpowered the drivers, because it, full-on ground effect. They were already pulling 5 and a bit G in the corners and some places. And there was that, but it was not 500 horsepower anymore. It was, by that time BMW was well up at sort of 850 horsepower range with the turbo thing, and that would have, and it was built purely as a pit stop car, so it was not the BT51, I beg your pardon, not BT50, BT51, because they were already racing the BT50 with this massive, great big fuel tank in it that they didn't know whether they were going to do, full-on race with a full tank or do pit stops or whatever. But they were started to play with pit stops, and the 51 was the pit stop car. 28 gallons of fuel, I think it took maximum. So you would be doing 1 or 2 pit stops in a race anyway. But what it also then meant was that we would be able to run softer tyre. Remember back in the day, I can remember in the late 70s, early 80s, where we'd have 20 sets of tyres per car. Not 4 or 5 and, the fixed compounds or whatever. And there was soft compounds, medium compounds, different constructions. If you do a qualifying session and you probably have 4 or 5 tyres go on in qualifying in the hour, banging on soft rubber or whatever in the hour, a different world altogether. And obviously that BT51 was, you just stand back and think about it. I mean, it would have absolutely flown, because nobody else had gone for the pit stops in really a big way. There was some people playing around at it, but hadn't gone for it in a big way in any way, shape, or form. And it was the way to go. And anyway, the long and the short of it was then the rules changed, and the BT52 came out, and flat bottom, no flat bottom, or tiny flat bottom, and it's very small fuel tank, and turned into the most beautiful bloody racing car, an absolute rocket ship. And I wasn't on the race team. I was then effectively, there was myself and a guy called Graham Lewins, and we were on the test team. So it was just myself, Graham, and a guy called George Iribar. George Iribar was our truck, and we used to drive off to various tracks for BMW and Nelson to play with, whether it was down at Claremont-Ferrand, tested Rio tyre testing, because it was all Michelin's then. or any one of the circuits. Monza, we tested out quite a few times. Brands, we did the wonderful run, the most amazing run down at Brands Hatch with Stirling Moss, and testing. Capelli drove the Brabham that day. Stirling Moss, and there was this an American laddie whose name I forget there, and Pierluigi Martini. They all tested, but Stirling started the day. That was an amazing day.
How did Stirling go?
He did incredibly well. I mean, that was an absolute beast of a thing. I mean, it was. He drove Brands Hatch for 20 laps with a 1200 horsepower Formula One car. He was what Indy circuit. No, it was the Indy circuit. But I mean, he drove 20 laps of that with 1200 horsepower.
Yeah,
that was the spec because that's the spec Bernie wanted him to, and he wanted the junior drivers to feel what real bloody power was, and how to get around it and stuff. But Stirling, it was amazing. He was when he'd finished his run, came back into the pits, and Herb and I went down to have a word with him in the cockpit, and he said, "Guys, can you just talk to me for a few minutes before I get out?" He said, "Because I don't think I can stand up." He said, my legs are still shaking. He said, "Well, let's just have a chat here for a few minutes, because the worst thing that would happen if I stood up and fell down."
Well,
so we chatted because I know he was, man. He was giving it some, because he was there, as we subsequently found out, because the American guy, his name's come back to me. His name was Davy Jones. Well, Stirling Moss went quicker than Davy Jones in the same car, the same spec exactly. There was no changes. Capelli was faster than Martini, and anyway. So he was there. Sterling was quite special. Anyway, we did. Yeah, there was lots of tests, and it was all at the start of the games we were playing with the slowly upgrading the BMW engine in peace and quiet. So a lot of the tests that we did were just us and BMW. There was nobody else at circuits and stuff. Went off to Austria once to do a test in Austria for 3 days because it was very close to BMW. They were literally going backwards and forwards from Munich to the Österreichring, with bits and pieces and turbos and exhausts and chips that go in the electronics and what have you. It was all being done there. And then we did the Monza test, which was a big one, because the Monza test that year in '83 was with a much a higher grade, different grade of the Wintershall fuel that we used to use in the BMWs, and I think it was the last day that we were testing, and we were waiting for something to be driven down from Munich down to Monza. And it had literally been run the day before on the dyno, blown the dyno up at Munich with this spec, and they just sent the parts down, which we fitted to the car, and Nelson went out and just said, "Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable." He only did 3 laps in the car because the engine was buggered then, and it was just trying to remember his name. Anyway, it's gone out of my head for the second. It'll probably pop back in a minute. One of the German engineers, anyway, the engineer rather than technicians, had said to me that in the spec that we were currently running was 1,550 horsepower, and that's why it had blown the dyno up. And and Nelson said, that he put it into fourth gear and spin the wheel. He had to back off and get the traction back to be able to, and then he put it into fifth, and it would still spin the wheels. So we going up and up and up the gears, because of course we could go so much faster. So we knew straight away then that we were in a different league, and certainly in qualifying. And yeah, so that was that.